Hey everyone, welcome back to Revenge Reloaded. The morning of my 23rd birthday, while I was slinging lattes at Desert Brew coffee shop, my phone buzzed with a text from my dad. Sold your laptop. Sophie needed a new phone. My heart dropped. Then came the hammer. Also, you're paying Sophie's tuition, $7,000 by Monday. I typed back, no way. His reply came instantly. Then get out. You're cut off. What my parents had no clue about was that years of their favoritism and financial abuse had left me with a hidden folder of proof. And when I finally unleashed it, exposing stolen trust funds and unauthorized withdrawals, their golden child fantasy collapsed, forcing repayment and a reckoning they never saw coming. My name is Emma Carter, and I'm 23. My 23rd birthday was supposed to be a day of celebration, maybe just a quiet moment to reflect on another year of grinding through college and work. Instead, it became the day my world flipped upside down. I was sitting in the back of Desert Brew, the coffee shop where I work as a barista, when my phone buzzed with that text from my dad. Greg, sold your laptop. That laptop, a Dell XPS I'd saved for over a year to buy, was my lifeline. It held my thesis, job applications, class notes, everything. I stared at the screen, hoping I'd misread it. Then came the next message. Also, you're paying Sophie's tuition, $7,000 by Monday. I typed back, shaking, no way. His response was cold and final. Then get out. You're cut off. Have you ever had your family betray you on your birthday? Stick around, because this is the story of how I took my life back. And before we go further, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. To understand how this explosion happened, you need the backstory of growing up in the Carter house. From the outside, we looked normal. A decent home in Tucson, holidays together, family photos on the walls. But inside, favoritism ruled everything. My younger sister Sophie, 19 at the time, was the golden child. Loud, charming, always at the center of attention. Mom, Linda, and Dad, Greg, revolved around her. New clothes, lessons, endless second chances. I was the reliable one, the strong daughter who didn't need much. Mom loved saying, Emma can handle herself. What it really meant was, Sophie comes first, Emma comes last. It started small. My 16th birthday party was quietly canceled so Sophie could afford a recital outfit. A $2,000 graduation gift from my aunt mysteriously funded Sophie's car instead. I swallowed the disappointment, worked harder, and learned how to disappear. When I graduated high school, I earned a scholarship and walked the stage proud. My parents left early so they wouldn't miss Sophie's cheer tryout. There were no photos of me that day, only captions online about Sophie's big moment. In college, I juggled two jobs, barista at Desert Brew and freelance social media work to pay tuition. My parents said they couldn't help. Meanwhile, Sophie flunked community college twice from partying and still got a brand new iPhone, a car, and art lessons. She's finding herself, Dad said. You're fine, Emma. Fine meant scraping by while they quietly borrowed from my bank account for emergencies. Money that was never repaid. Over time, it added up to thousands. I stayed quiet because I believed family helped family. That morning at Desert Brew, my coworkers tried to make my birthday special. Sarah brought me a cookie with a candle stuck in it. Tom handed me a $20 gift card and said, you're killing it. There. Kindness stung. Strangers saw my effort. My own family never did. Halfway through my shift, Dad's text hit. Sold my laptop for Sophie's phone. Pay her tuition or get out. The cafe felt like it was spinning. That laptop held my future, my thesis, job applications, everything. Gone for an iPhone. And now they wanted $7,000 while I was already drowning in bills. I finished my shift on autopilot, then drove straight to my best friend Mia Lopez's apartment, tears blurring the road. Mia had been my rock since high school. One look at me and she asked, what did they do? I showed her the texts. She stared at my phone in disbelief. They sold your laptop and demanded tuition money? That's insane. I finally let years of frustration spill out. How Sophie was always the priority. How I paid bills while she got chances. How I was expected to pick up the slack without ever being asked. Mia said something that made everything snap into focus. Emma, this isn't favoritism anymore. This is abuse. They're using you. And that's when I knew I had to act. Mia didn't sugarcoat it. You need to get your stuff out. And you need to make them face this. That night, we sat on her couch and started thinking clearly. I told her about the hidden cash I'd kept, $500 tucked under a loose floorboard. I'd learned a long time ago not to trust my parents with access to everything I owned. But cash wasn't enough. What I needed was proof. I went back to the house late that night. It was silent. Everyone was asleep. In the back of my closet sat a small box I'd been adding to for years. I never planned to use it. I just couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Inside were bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals, receipts for bills I'd paid that weren't mine, handwritten notes about loans I was promised would be repaid and never were. There was a paper trail. I spent the entire night copying documents. Bank statements showed over $9,500 taken from my account over 5 years. Receipts proved I'd covered nearly 65% of household bills while I was a full-time student. Notes detailed money spent on Sophie's art lessons, my mom's home repairs, my dad's debts. None of it ever returned. mind. And then there was the worst part. A college trust fund. My grandparents had set aside $20,000 for my education. I'd been told it was used up and that loans were my responsibility. The statements showed the truth. It had been drained to cover Sophie's failed semesters and my parents' expenses. I added the receipt for my laptop, proof of its value, and printed everything neatly. By 3 a.m., the folder was complete. I packed a suitcase, took the necklace my grandma gave me, left the folder on the kitchen table with a note on top. Then I drove away under a desert sky full of stars, grieving the family I never really had, terrified of what came next, and for the first time, choosing myself. I woke up on Mia's pull-out couch to sunlight and non-stop buzzing. 27 missed calls, 43 texts, voicemails stacked on top of each other. They'd found the folder. Sophie texted first at 7:14 a.m. What did you do? Mom and Dad are losing it. The messages kept coming, angry at first, then panicked, then pleading. Mom's voicemails shifted from rage to desperation. We need to talk as a family. Let's work this out. We love you. Dad stayed cold. You're ungrateful. You'll regret this. Regret what? They'd already taken everything they could. For a moment, guilt crept in, like I'd betrayed them by telling the truth. That reflex was hard to shake. Years of being taught that protecting myself was selfish. Mia took my phone out of my hands. Don't let them get in your head. You did the right thing. This folder proves you're not crazy. Then my phone rang again. This time, it was my grandmother, Margaret. Her voice was sharp, angrier than I'd ever heard it. Emma, I just spoke to your parents. I had no idea it was this bad. I'm coming to Tucson tomorrow with a lawyer. Do not speak to them until I arrive. Mia stared at me when I hung up. Your grandma is furious. That's when I realized the folder had done more than expose abuse. It had started a reckoning. That afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was my Aunt Rachel, my mom's older sister. She'd always been the cool aunt, the one who lived alone, traveled for work, sent postcards from places like Sedona and Santa Fe, and never bought into family drama. Emma, honey, are you okay? She asked gently. I told her everything. The laptop, the tuition, demand, the folder, the texts. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, her voice hardened. I'm furious, she said. Your parents have been mismanaging money for years, but this is a whole new level. Then she dropped the bomb. Did you know your grandparents set up trust funds for both you and Sophie when you were born? I froze. What happened to mine? I asked, barely above a whisper. Rachel didn't hesitate. Your parents drained it. She explained it slowly, carefully, like she didn't want to knock the air out of me all at once. My grandparents had created equal college trust funds for both of us. I was supposed to gain access at 18, but my dad convinced the trustees I wasn't ready and needed oversight. Instead, they used my fund. They paid for Sophie's car, her art lessons, her failed semesters at community college. And when that money ran out, they kept lying, telling me loans were necessary while quietly funneling my future into hers. I felt like I'd been punched. All those nights working double shifts, all that guilt about student debt, all that be responsible. Emma, they had the money. They just chose her. Rachel told me. Grandma Margaret found out that morning when she reviewed the documents from the folder. She was livid. She'd already contacted a lawyer to audit both trusts. You're not alone anymore, Rachel said. We're fixing this. When I hung up, I just sat there, not crying, not screaming, just stunned. Mia placed a hand on my shoulder. That's next level messed up, she said quietly. Later that day, Sophie texted again. This one was different. I didn't know any of this. I'm so confused. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a long time. Sophie had always been the golden child, but now I wondered how much of that was manipulation. How much she'd been told stories that made all of this feel normal. I didn't respond yet. By evening, the situation had snowballed. Word spread. Calls came in from relatives who suddenly had questions. My parents couldn't hide anymore. Not with Grandma Margaret flying in with a lawyer. Not with bank statements, receipts, and trust fund audits on the table. Fear still lived in my chest, but it was changing shape. For the first time in my life, people were listening. The silence that once swallowed me had cracked open. And everything after that, there was no going back. The next morning, my grandmother Margaret arrived in Tucson exactly as promised, with a lawyer and 0 patients left. She didn't come to comfort anyone. She came to audit. By noon, my parents' house felt like a crime scene. Documents were spread across the dining table. Bank statements, trust records, loan agreements, and receipts were examined line by line. The lawyer barely spoke at first. He didn't need to. The numbers spoke for themselves. My parents sat stiff and silent. By mid-afternoon, the truth was undeniable. The trust fund my grandparents created for me had been emptied years ago. Not for emergencies, not for survival, but to cover Sophie's failures and my parents' lifestyle gaps. Unauthorized withdrawals, misrepresentation to trustees, clear financial abuse. My grandmother didn't raise her voice. That scared them more than yelling ever could. You stole from your own daughter, she said quietly, and you lied to this family for years. Sophie started crying. Real crying this time, not the dramatic kind. She kept saying she didn't know, that she was told it was normal, that she thought the money was family money. The lawyer corrected her gently. It wasn't. By the end of the day, the consequences were laid out. My parents were ordered to repay the trust fund in full, every dollar, through a structured repayment plan enforced by the family trustees. Their access to all remaining shared accounts was revoked. The audit would continue. And then came the line that changed everything for me. Emma is no longer financially tied to this household in any way. No leverage, no access, no control. That night, I didn't go back to my parents' house. I stayed with my Aunt Rachel, who insisted I move to Phoenix temporarily. You need space, she said, and you need stability. Within a week, I had a new bank account, one my parents couldn't touch. Fraud alerts activated, credit frozen, a replacement laptop ordered with Rachel's help, a guest room that felt safer than any bedroom I'd ever had growing up. Work came next. Through a connection of Rachel's, I landed an interview at a small tech startup in Phoenix. I walked in nervous, explaining gaps, setbacks, lost equipment. The hiring manager listened carefully, then said, anyone who survives what you did and still finishes college, that's grit. They offered me the job on the spot. Flexible hours, decent pay, and a loaner laptop until I could replace mine. I cried in my car afterward, not from fear this time, but relief. Back in Tucson, the fallout continued. My parents downsized. Subscriptions were canceled. Reality hit hard when no one stepped in to quietly cover the gaps anymore. Sophie had to face consequences for the first time in her life. Family therapy started. Awkward, tense, uncomfortable. I attended once, not to fix them, but to make my boundaries clear. I'm not the safety net anymore, I said, and I won't apologize for that. For the first time, no one argued. Back in Phoenix, something inside me finally settled. I slept through the night, stopped jumping every time my phone buzzed, started planning a future that didn't revolve around surviving someone else's choices. I wasn't the strong one anymore. I was just free. In the weeks that followed, my life didn't suddenly turn perfect, but it finally became mine. The repayment process began quietly. Monthly transfers, legal oversight, no dramatic apologies, no speeches about family love, just consequences, enforced on paper. For the first time, accountability existed where excuses used to live. My parents didn't call much anymore. When they did, their voices sounded different, careful, restrained, like they were finally aware that the leverage they once held was gone. They couldn't demand, they couldn't threaten, they couldn't guilt me into fixing things anymore. Sophie reached out once. Her message wasn't angry. It wasn't manipulative. It was confused. I didn't know, she wrote. I thought this was just how things worked. I stared at that text for a long time. She wasn't lying. She had been raised to believe resources magically appeared when she needed them. That responsibility always belonged to someone else, usually me. I replied once. I didn't know either. Until I did. That was all. Maybe one day we'll talk again. Maybe we won't. Either way, I don't carry that weight anymore. In Phoenix, my routine slowly stabilized. I worked during the day, took classes at night, sat on my aunt's balcony in the evenings, laptop open, desert sky stretching wide and quiet above me. For the first time, silence didn't feel like neglect. It felt like peace. Therapy helped untangle years of guilt. Dr. Lee explained something that hit me hard. When a family labels one child as strong, it often means they expect that child to absorb pain quietly. I had done that my entire life. Absorbed disappointment, absorbed responsibility, absorbed financial strain that was never mine to carry. Letting go of that role felt terrifying at first, like stepping off a cliff without knowing if there was ground below. There was. Friends stepped in where family didn't. Opportunities appeared once I stopped surviving and started choosing. Confidence grew when I realized my worth had never depended on how useful I was to others. The biggest change wasn't financial. It was internal. I stopped explaining myself, stopped justifying boundaries, stopped apologizing for saying no. I learned something vital. Love that requires self-destruction is not love. Family doesn't mean unlimited access to your time, money, or future. Strength doesn't mean silence. And independence doesn't mean you deserve less. On my 24th birthday, a year later, I didn't work a shift. I didn't answer guilt-filled texts. I didn't brace for impact. I sat at a small cafe in Phoenix with people who chose me, not because they needed something, but because they wanted me there. No cake in my face. No ultimatums. No threats. Just laughter, warm coffee, and a future that finally felt solid beneath my feet. If you're watching this and recognizing yourself in my story, being called the strong one, the reliable one, the one who always figures it out, hear this clearly. You are not selfish for protecting what you worked for. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. And you are not wrong for choosing yourself, even if no one taught you how. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fixing the problem. It's walking away from the system that created it. Thanks so much for watching. More of my most gripping stories are already on your screen. Click one now, and don't miss what happens next. You're going to want to hear it.